I'm Oleksii Novikov. My supervisors are David Fucci, Daniel Mendes, and Alexander Adamov. So my topic is supporting security in software supply chain, and I'll present your roadmap of my project. So let's begin with the context, or to be more precise with a terminology to use. So the first term is DevSecOps. It's a development methodology that integrates the security practices into the DevOps process, ensuring security is addressed at every stage of the software development lifecycle, from planning and development to deployment and maintenance. SBOM. SBOM is a detailed list of all components, libraries, and dependencies used in a software project and presented in a machine-readable format. And there are several different formats that exist, like SPDX and CycloneDX. But they are different from the usual log files with dependencies, as SBOM can represent different ecosystems in one single file. And the last but not least is a software supply chain attacks. Those attacks targeting vulnerabilities in the software supply chain, such as software providers, third-party vendors, or service providers. So there are two types of companies that we are interested in: software providers and software consumers. Let's begin with a picture of a roadmap. Currently, we have already done SBOM state of practice first study, and we have submitted study 1 to European Security and Privacy Conference. Currently, we have started the study 2, and we have a CISAM project ongoing. So the study 2 is an interview study based on SURE, European Cybersecurity Act. Currently, this act is going to be enforced in the middle of 2026 and closer to the end of 2027. This act is used to enhance the security practices in the companies, and we'll talk about it later. Closer to the study 2. Study 3 is based on a CISAM project and a result from the study 2. We will create a tool for secure software supply chain, and we will also create some metrics and systems that will measure the safe metrics of a dependency in order to say to the developers, well, you can use this dependency safely, or this dependency needs to have an additional security check by security team. Then we'll have a study 4 right after the middle of 2026, when there is going to be a first and foremost enforcement of CRA. We'll measure impact of CRA and check progress on software provider companies. And the last but not least study is study 5. We will create a big tool as for study 3, but for larger projects, not for only one project, but for large set of projects that companies can use in their environment. So let's talk about the first study. Our research questions were: how can we differentiate policy-driven SBOMs against synthetic ones? So basically, policy-driven is a term that we have defined in our study. We want to show a specific border between policy-driven SBOMs that will represent a specific project and unrelated data that can be either generated synthetically for other scientific studies or generated by different dependency manager tools. And then we wanted to answer the question: to what extent are policy-driven SBOMs adopted among the most popular open source projects? And what are the properties of current policy-driven SBOMs? Basically, what is a policy-driven SBOM? How do we define it? Basically, the term in the lab SBOM and in the wild SBOM already existed in the scientific literature. What does it mean? In the lab means that SBOM files that were generated for scientific studies in order to compare SBOM generation tools or to compare SBOM formats between themselves. And in the wild, those are SBOMs that were created by actual living developers for their necessities or some kind of dependency management tools. But we have decided to also cut off the test data. As you can see here, this SBOM file that was created by a developer, but it was used for test resources for their tool. So it's not a real SBOM. It's kind of unrelated for our project. And third-party imported SBOM, there is the other name for those SBOMs, the name fixtures. They were created by dependency manager tools, not by real developers. And I think personally that real developers had no actual meaning of sharing those SBOMs. Because the real SBOM that developers want to share is the one that lays into releases or in the source code in actual source code. So quick facts about the first study. We have mined a large set of most popular GitHub repositories. It was 26,000 of repositories. Why 26? Because we wanted to choose 1,000 of most popular repositories for 26 languages. And 26 languages was the most popular languages according to TOB index and GitHub data. We have also defined the policy-driven SBOMs grounded in the existing literature and state of practice in open source projects. And we have created a tool to extract policy-driven SBOMs from GitHub repository resources, such as from releases, artifacts, or the source code. And the last that we have found little evidence of policy-driven SBOMs occurrence in real project. Actually, have found that only 3% of 26,000 top popular repositories contained any kind of policy-driven SBOMs. And well, the most popular ecosystem to use SBOM were Golang with 82,000 dependencies. Then cut in half comes NPM, 48,000 dependencies, then cut in half Maven, and only then Debian. Debian package manager is used by the Docker containers. So let's begin with study 2. What is a CRA? CRA is European Cyber Resilience Act, is a EU regulation aimed to ensure cybersecurity of digital products and services throughout their lifecycle. So as I have mentioned, we have the first enforcement in June 2026, and the last final enforcement at the end of 2027. What is the motivation for this study? The motivation is that mandatory deadline for CRA actually enforces the mandatory deadlines for security incidents. That means that currently not so many companies report publicly their cybersecurity incidents. But CRA asked them not to also provide the information publicly for the users, but they also want to provide them as detailed as possible as to what data has been leaked, to what extent it has been leaked. And also they ask companies to mandatory to inform their endpoint users that were affected by this vulnerability. And also CRA requires strict requirements for the vulnerability management processes, including third-party dependencies. So if your code or if the dependency of your code has some kind of vulnerability, you need to disclose it publicly. And also this process has also a deadline in 1 month. Currently, companies, they can make it closed, or they can make it public in like half a year. And after the enforcement of CRA, it will be only 1 month to report the vulnerability. So it's kind of strict and tough security rules that are going to hit the market. Our interview study based on those topics, we are going to ask the developers, legal department, project managers, and the security. And of course, we have slightly different plot of interviews for different kind of people. Our main topic is how companies prepare for the CRA. Do they actually prepare them? And after that, we can see that this first question comes up with two other questions, like we want to know the current state of security in companies and the company's assessment of the impact of CRA on them. So maybe some companies have already some kind of strict deadlines for their security, and it's not going to have an impact for them, like kind of Microsoft or other big tech company. But if there is some kind of smaller company that is not following those strict guidelines, yeah, it's going to hit them hard tough. Also, we want to see how the companies assess their dependencies, whether they have log files or they use SBOMs, and how the companies use SBOMs in their projects. And the other question is how the companies deal with known and potential vulnerabilities. Do they have a security department? Do they report them? What is the current state, actually? So about this study, we had already a pilot interview. The pilot interview was with Florian. He is an industrial PhD student in Siemens. The interview went well, and the timeline of the interview was the biggest slot for the interview, and it went for 1 hour and 15 minutes. So we guess kind of fine, as other interviews will be shorter. What are the set of interview candidates for us? We have decided to go with Ericsson, Codeteam, and Syntera from CISAM project. Those companies are software providers, as they provide the software, either for themselves or internally, or for public externally. eTester from the third project. eTester is a service provider, as they provide service of rewriting the software from old languages like COBOL into the modern ones. So people can actually support those projects. We have other companies as fintech company in Norway and companies from our personal networks as well. And you can propose more companies for us. We are asking for software companies that provide the software or receive the software. Our sample size is we are going to do as much interview as possible until the data saturation, until we'll have no more new data about companies' preparedness. And the methodology. We are going to do the data collection based on open-ended and closed questions. And we are going to do the thematic analysis that starts with open coding. After that, we will apply actual coding. And in the final, we're left with interconnected ideas. So we can get all the ideas into our study. So what are the expected results? We expect to see the overall awareness about CRA preparedness across all companies in Europe. Also, we want to see the current set of practice in terms of vulnerability management and SBOM management. And the last one is that we want to see the difference between perception of CRA, because we can understand that fear has a big eyes, against the actual standard. And the next steps that we are going to do after the study 2 is creating the study 3 tool and reassessing the impact of CRA after the first enforcement. That's it. And I want to hear a question from you about the second study, as it is the most critical in our roadmap. You can begin, Andy.
Maybe I got a bit lost. Could you summarize the overall goal of the PhD thesis and how the different studies contributes towards it? And is there like any dependency between the papers? So for instance, is the SBOM aspect a necessity for the CRA thing, or did you came up with it, and how does it contribute towards your goal?
Yes, actually, the SBOM is a necessary part of the CRA, as CRA asks the companies also to provide a list of their dependencies in SBOM format, and there's currently a war between formats in SBOM going on. So there's quite a difficult task for our companies, and also as we have seen in our study one, only 3% of most top popular GitHub repositories actually use SBOMs in their projects. So that's why we have decided to go with first study, a study in the state of the practice in terms of SBOM.
And what type of problem does it try to solve? So the overall goal?
So overall goal, SBOM is trying to solve.
I mean, your PhD topic, or
in my PhD topic is trying to see the first study is giving us a full the kind of broad analysis of to what extent SBOM is introduced across developers. In second study, we are going to ask them how do they prepare for CRA and how do they use SBOMs in their software companies, because CRA is going to ask the companies to use those SBOM files. And as you can see, the second study is going to provide to each other later study, as we will base every other study then on the interview and the information that we'll get from the second study. We actually want to know the actual problems. Yeah, of course, we'll focus also on SBOMs as an integral part of our PhD study, but also we want to see what other kind of problems do developers and project managers security team have in their companies as well. Yeah, move on. Oh,
because I can't see one. Okay, thank you for the talk. I just have a question about study two. You mentioned the person that you interviewed. Did you cut the consent for you to share their names or information when you talk?
Yeah, we can share the names, but not the information. We will not include this information in our study.
Just to be sure about it.
Yes.
I had a follow-up question to what Andy already was asking at the end. So it's clear that you will collect a lot of information about the state of the art in the beginning of your study, but and the problems that are out there. But then the follow-up question to that is, okay, depending on what you find out, what is your plan to do about it? So what are the actionable things you want to do to help to mitigate these
problems? So actually, study 3 is going to address the problems that we'll find in study 2, and we'll create a tool that will go through each dependency and assess it based on some kind of metrics, and we'll also assess the other kind of problems that we don't know across the developers from the study 2. Maybe they have some kind of problems, not only with SBOM, but with some kind of other dependency metrics. Maybe they decided to copy the code and paste it in their projects in order to overcome some kind of license issues or some kind of vulnerability issues as well. So, yes.
So you want to provide a tool that kind of gives you a security vulnerability rating.
Yes, indeed.
On a high level.
Yes.
Okay.
It is.
Okay, then I get it.
Yeah.
Question: what do you expect in the interview study? You will do one pass interview with each company, will you, or multiple?
Multiple companies.
Multiple, but will it be one interview per company, or will it be repeated?
It is not going to be one interview per company, as we have mentioned here. We are going to ask developers, legal, project. Of course, we will not have like 4 interviews for a company, but we are going to aim at those people in the campus. If we can get 2 developers from one company, it's great.
I'm just asking, do you intend to repeatedly ask the same person to because my feeling from being in the corporate world is that, or my guess is that most people that you'll meet in the companies, they have no clue about CRA. I didn't, and probably most people don't. So I guess the interview will be their first interaction with, oh, this is something I need to learn about. So it would make sense for me. It would make sense to you do an interview and try to get the knowledge, right? But then you come back like half a year later or 3 months later or whatever and ask again, because then they probably have reacted. If they are professional about it, they should react by then.
That we are going to do a study for with the same people?
Yeah, I think so. I think it would make sense because people probably, I mean, I can't honor for myself, right? But being in the corporate world, I would expect people to don't know, because it was the same. I think it's the same as with GDPR, right? It took like almost a year before people kind of reacted to GDPR, right? It took like a year to get people, oh, I need to do something, and that was like 10% of the corporate of the turnover they have as a fee, right? I guess it's something similar here. You have a fee of X% of the turnover of the company if they don't comply after a while, right? 2027 or so. So it takes time for corporate people to kind of, because they have they need to come up with their KPIs and yada yada and quarterly reports and whatnot. So they are kind of busy with their work, right? And this is something foreign for them. I think it would make sense to have some kind of at least some roles or some you can do like repeated interviews to say, okay, what have you done now then? Because otherwise it will kind of probably, I think it would be kind of shallow otherwise. That's my reaction.
I have a follow-up question to that. Like based on your PhD roadmap, you had like study 2 and study 4, I think it was, like which I think alludes a little bit what you're saying on this, which is like an impact of CRA, check progress on this. So is it that kind of like a follow-up study? Because I understand that study 2 is like approaching practitioners and ask them, okay, are you ready or not? And then they say yes, no, or I don't know what CRA is. And then the impact of CRA, how does that like fit into the context of your PhD? Like, or maybe I misunderstood it. Please correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, I'll answer the first question. Actually, in the first question, we expect that people in the companies don't know what is a CRA or know very little information. But actually, CRA based on some kind of common knowledge of vulnerability management, of dependency management, and that's why we have like this concept of security in companies. They may not know what the CRA about, but they for sure know information about the security state in their companies. So they don't know about the deadlines of CRA, but they do know how do they handle vulnerability management process and how do they disclose the vulnerabilities to the public. So that's why we have kind of safe trap on this kind of problem. And what about the study 4? Study 4 is going to be some kind of continuation study of study 2. But as we have mentioned, here, there's going to be a first enforcement. So the first fines are going to hit companies after the mid of 2026. So we expect them to be prepared, but yeah, we will assess it. Yeah.
Can you return to the second study slide? So I have multiple questions. First, you have selected a few candidate companies to interview.
Yeah.
Who qualifies to be interviewed? So you have a mixture of B2B companies and B2C companies.
Yeah.
And I think you need to have some sort of criteria who qualifies to be a part of this.
So basically, have main criteria that the company needs to be like software provider, that they actually write the software, and of course CRA is going to hit them at first, and then it's kind of software receivers. CRA is not going to hit them hard and at the first, but we want to also assess the problems that they're going to see with incoming CRA enforcement. So basically, it's like the main companies are software providers and software service providers like eTestro, that they're actively generating some code, and they will be hit off from the how do I say, from serial enforcement.
Okay. Second question, who are the project managers? Because a lot of companies don't work in projects anymore.
Actually, the project managers are just people who work in role as a project managers.
Yeah, most companies don't work in projects anymore.
So
There are product owners, there
Uh-huh.
are team managers. So who are project managers?
Okay, that's a valid reason. They should address. So yeah.
So we call them program managers, but it's still about managing people. But I totally agree. We don't have projects like 1-year projects anymore. We have more like continuous programs running. So it will be kind of what the project did before, but not really. Yeah. So
It can be APOs, but it can be also team managers. So this is unclear.
Managing the team, the people, or managing the budget for the whatever work you're
Or the
doing, right?
product. I mean,
Yeah, exactly. So it is a valid concern. I mean, you have to decide basically, because managing people like a line manager, I don't think that would totally relevant for this, but managing products or programs or whatever, call it what you want, technical stuff, that certainly qualifies, I would say. So, yeah.
Just one more last question. Looking at your studies, most of them are descriptive. So from a scientific point of view, it's interesting to see where you go deep and how you do it. And with like having 2, 3, 4 people from 3, 4 companies, maybe that's not enough depth. So maybe this is something you can think about.
Yeah, of course. That's why we have also kind of companies from personal networks,
Mhm.
and we also have asked other colleagues to provide us fintech companies for in Norway, and yeah, we also ask you. Maybe you can provide us some more companies to do the study. We don't want to limit us only to a certain circle of companies. Yeah.
I had a little bit more general question than Daria, Felix, and Anders were already asking, and that has to do with the sampling in general. So you're doing interview studies in the beginning, then some time is going, and then you want to see how a certain event hits companies. So how do you make sure that the difference that you see is, on what is it dependent? Just the size, the time that is expiring in the meantime? Is it the difference between people you're interviewing, because you're probably not interviewing exactly the same people at exactly the same companies? Or is it just that you have maybe different company that you interview? And interview studies are a little bit vulnerable to that. If you do a large-scale survey, then okay, you have enough data points that this validity threat is evened out. But here, selection of interviews is really, really critical to guarantee that you can provide reliable answers to the questions you're asking.
So basically, I personally think that in order to mitigate to at least some kind of point, we need to repeat the continuation study with the same set of companies, because we would have already with study 2 some kind of base knowledge what they had already, so we can assess the progress. Otherwise, there's not going to be like kind of way to assess the progress.
But then it's still like Anders said, if you have developer A at data point 1 and then developer B at data point B, they are maybe have completely different background and give you completely different answers. So it might even be that you are lucky and hit the only developer that knows CRA perfectly at this company at the first point in time, and then one who has no clue at the second point in time. So
Yeah,
that is a risk.
why we are asking them not their personal knowledge base, what do they know about vulnerability management, but we are asking them how do they manage vulnerabilities in their projects. Like, what do they actually do? What steps do they do in order to mitigate some kind of issues? So with this kind of step, we are going to also mitigate the problem of different people.
Okay.
How about architect?
Mm,
Are developers only like coders or broader, like any software engineers or testers, for example?
developers broader, as like testers and software engineers. At the architects, we think, me with my supervisor, that we are going to include them in some kind of section of project managers or product managers. We will not ask them specifically software developers question or specifically security questions, but we'll ask them how do they manage issues on more abstract levels.